Okay, so get this right. Elon Musk's team now has access to the federal payment system, the same one that handles, Social Security, Medicare, tax refunds. We're talking trillions of dollars here. I know, wild.
Wild is an understatement for sure. And it all comes down to this thing called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short. Yeah, really, DOGE. It was actually started back during the Trump administration, and the idea was streamlining federal spending.
So basically, DOGE is giving Musk's team like a peek behind the curtain, but it's read-only access. So they could see the transactions, but they can't change anything.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, imagine giving someone a really detailed map of a super complicated plumbing system. They can see where everything flows, they can see potential leaks or blockages or whatever, but they can't actually touch any of the valves.
I like that analogy. That makes it much clearer. Okay, so before we get into all the details here, if you're finding this as fascinating as we are, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations like this one.
So this read-only access is really at the heart of the whole debate, right? Supporters say. It's like having a super efficient auditor, like with a magnifying glass, looking for any kind of waste or inefficiency in government spending. And they point to Musk's record with companies like Tesla, where, he completely changed electric car manufacturing and brought the costs way down. And they think he could bring that same perspective to the way the government works.
I can see that side of it. But then you have the critics who are kind of understandably nervous about giving this much influence to someone who wasn't elected, right? Even if it's just read-only. Is this like a slippery slope toward more private control over government finances? And how do we even ensure accountability there?
All really valid points. And it's even more complicated because Musk's companies already get billions in government contracts. Like SpaceX, for example. They've gotten billions from NASA for their space exploration programs. So it raises all these questions about potential conflicts of interest, maybe even unintentional ones. Like, could having access to these financial records give his businesses an advantage when they're bidding on future contracts?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely makes things more complicated, especially when you think about how much sensitive information is in that system, right? Social Security numbers, tax records, it's a ton of personal data. And the Treasury Department says that all the activity is being monitored, but how much detail can Musk's team actually see? And wouldn't even just knowing the intricacies of government spending give them valuable insights, even if it is just in a read-only capacity? Couldn't that benefit their businesses?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just the companies he has now. Musk is always starting new things. So could this access, influence his decisions about what to start next? It's definitely something to think about.
And then there's the whole debate about what counts as wasteful spending. Right. That's a really subjective thing with potentially huge consequences. For example, there was a GAO report in 2020 that found billions of dollars lost every year due to improper payments in Medicare. And Musk has already said that he's finding similar issues, which, could save taxpayers a lot of money. But what if his definition of waste clashes with programs that might not be the most efficient, but are still considered vital, like for social good, Yeah. Who gets to decide that?
Now that's where things get really interesting. This situation really forces us to confront this tension between expertise and democratic processes. On the one hand, you have the potential to find real problems, cases of fraud and mismanagement that might have gone completely unnoticed. But on the other hand, you have someone who wasn't elected, potentially wielding a lot of influence over decisions that affect millions of people. It raises some really fundamental questions about how we govern ourselves and who we trust with that power. What do you think about all this? Do you think having an outside perspective like Musk's brings more benefits than risks? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments. And if you're finding this discussion insightful, don't forget to give it a like. It helps others find these conversations. The ones that really matter. It really comes down to trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, like, do we trust someone who wasn't elected to have this much insight into how the government spends money? Or should that be left strictly to our elected officials, the ones who are accountable to the voters?
And it's important to remember that it's not about, demonizing one side or the other. There are good arguments on both sides. Musk's supporters, for instance, they talk a lot about his track record with innovation and efficiency. They think he can bring a fresh perspective, shake things up a bit in a system that's often seen as slow and bureaucratic.
Yeah, and they also point out that he's already saying he's found real problems.
Yeah.
Like actual cases of fraud and mismanagement, stuff that might have gone completely unnoticed. He even said his team found payments go into organizations that turned out to be fraudulent.
Right, and if that's true, it would definitely make a strong case for his involvement and the potential for positive change. But it also raises the question of how we verify those claims. Like, how much transparency is there? How do we know that his team's findings are accurate, unbiased? We're basically taking his word for it. And while he has a lot of supporters, he also has plenty of critics who question his motives and methods.
And those critics would argue that, even with the best intentions, the potential for conflicts of interest is just way too high. Having access to that much sensitive data could give him a real advantage in the business world, whether he intends to use it that way or not.
Exactly. It's the slippery slope argument. But it's definitely worth considering. Imagine, for example, that his team finds inefficiencies in how the government buys solar panels. Could that information somehow benefit Tesla's solar energy division? Or maybe even be used to disadvantage their competitors? That's the kind of scenario that the critics are worried about.
It all comes back to accountability, right? Like, who is Elon Musk accountable to in this situation? Is it the government agency that gave him access? Is it his own companies and their shareholders? Or is it ultimately the American people, the ones whose tax dollars are being scrutinized?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's a question that goes way beyond this particular case. This whole thing with Elon Musk and Doge, it's just one example of a much bigger trend we're seeing more and more. Private individuals and corporations gaining power and influence in the public sphere.
It really makes you think about the future of democracy. How do we balance expertise and efficiency with things like transparency and accountability and democratic representation?
It's a complicated issue for sure. No easy answers. What do you think? Where do you stand on this whole issue of private influence in government? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you're finding this conversation valuable, hit that like button. Help spread the word.
Yeah, it feels like we're kind of at this crossroads, right? Trying to figure out this new world where the lines between public and private are getting blurrier and blurrier.
Absolutely, yeah. And the choices we make now, the precedents we set, they're going to have a huge impact on how our government works and just how our society operates in general.
So where do we go from here? Like, what are some potential solutions, or at least some steps we can take to address these concerns, to make sure we're not sacrificing those core democratic principles just for the sake of efficiency,
Well, one thing that's absolutely vital is transparency. We need to know exactly what Musk's team has access to, what data are they seeing, and how are they using it. All of that needs to be out in the open, subject to public scrutiny.
For sure. And along with transparency, I think, we need some really clear guidelines and safeguards in place to deal with those potential conflicts of interest that we were talking about.
Exactly. Some experts have even suggested setting up an independent oversight board to keep an eye on Musk's team and make sure they're operating ethically, responsibly, without any undue influence from their private sector connections.
That's a really interesting idea. And of course, Congress needs to step up too, right? They need to hold hearings, demand answers from Doge and from Musk's team. Make sure the public knows what's going on. After all, this is about our tax dollars and the potential impact on really important programs.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it all comes down to accountability. Elon Musk and his team, they need to be held accountable, not just to the agency that gave them access, but to the American people. It's our data and our tax dollars that are at stake.
And it's up to us as citizens to demand that accountability. We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We need to stay informed, engage in these debates, contact our elected officials, and make our voices heard.
Our democracy really depends on citizens being engaged and informed. This whole situation with Musk and Doge, it's just one example of a much bigger issue we're facing. It's a reminder that we need to be actively involved in shaping the future we want.
For sure. And this story is far from over. It's going to keep evolving, probably in ways we can't even imagine right now. But we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it and bringing you updates as they happen. And we encourage you to do the same. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And if you found this conversation thought-provoking, hit that like button and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future deep dives into topics that matter.
Thanks for listening.